Hello, let's think about business cycles and stabilization policies. Suppose we have a negative aggregate demand shock. That means that consumption, investment, government expenditures, or net exports have decreased for some reason. This will shock the system, and now aggregate demand will fall. On the diagram, that will show up as a leftward shift of the aggregate demand curve. I'm drawing it in right now. At this original price, there will now be a surplus. The surplus is given by the distance between what we are producing and what people want to consume. Because there is a surplus at P star, prices will tend to fall. But prices are sticky. And therefore, prices will not be able to fall completely. If they could fall completely, if prices could adjust perfectly, then you can see they would fall all the way down here and will be always at the long run natural level of output. Basically what would happen here is that as soon as there is a decrease in aggregate demand, falling prices will increase quantity demanded enough to bring us back to the natural level of output. But again, that's not realistic. Instead, we're going to have sticky prices. So let's think about those possibilities. With sticky prices, there are two theories we want to keep in mind. First is the sticky wage theory. That says that firms that are able to lower their prices will do so. But these firms have signed labor contracts based on higher price expectations. That is, the firms will not be able to reduce the cost of production enough to accommodate their lower prices. It probably makes sense to you that profits will therefore decrease, maybe even become negative, and when you have lower or negative profits, that will cause firms to cut back on production, and therefore output will decrease. This starts explaining our movement down the short-term aggregate supply curve. And that's the movement down explained by the sticky wage theory. Now there's a different explanation too. I'm going to bring that up. It's called the sticky price theory. Sticky price theory says that some firms will not be able to lower their prices, and therefore they will not be able to sell as much output as they used to. However, as firms sell fewer goods, inventories will start to increase, and as inventories build up, firms will cut back on production. Once again, we have a decrease in output. And that also explains, in a secondary way, the movement down the short-term aggregate supply curve. So basically, the sticky wage theory and the sticky price theory explains how we come to our second equilibrium over here, which is noted right there. So this is our second equilibrium. This is going to be our short-term equilibrium. We start out right over here in long run and short-term equilibrium. After the negative aggregate demand shock, you end up right over there. The fall in prices also makes us move down the aggregate demand curve. You can see that we were here and we're going to have to move way down there. And the reason is very similar. As prices fall, quantity demanded will increase for consumers and government perhaps, and we're going to move down the aggregate demand curve. All right, so now we are at this new lower short-run equilibrium. And you can see that the economy is basically in a recession here. Our output level is lower than the natural level of output, which means that we have lower incomes and greater unemployment. Now, this decrease in economic activity may spur the adoption of stabilization policies by the government and or the Federal Reserve Bank. There are four general policies that they could pursue. They are, first, they could decide to do nothing. If they do nothing, then they're going to allow the price mechanism to slowly bring the economy back to full employment and a natural level of output. Basically what that means is that this short-term aggregate supply curve will slowly shift to the right until you get back to the natural level output right down there at much lower prices. Alternatively, the government could or the Fed could increase the money supply. Another way to say an increase in money supply is to say a decrease in interest rate. There are different ways of achieving this, the most common being buying government bonds in open market operations. But the Fed can also reduce the discount rate, lower the reserve requirements, and the Fed can even print money or pursue quantitative easing policies, which means buying private bonds instead of government bonds. The third thing they can do is increase government spending. Government spending will increase the demand in the economy by paying for various government projects, such as fixing roads or fixing bridges or investing in sustainable energy or something like that. The fourth thing they can do is decrease taxes. The government can stimulate the economy by reducing taxes and thereby raising household disposable income. It is expected that when the disposable income goes up, consumption will go up and therefore aggregate demand will shift to the right. But it is somewhat uncertain how much aggregate demand and consumption is going to increase because of the household's marginal propensity to consume being less than 1. They will always save a portion of their increase in income. The fifth thing we could do is to do both changing government spending and changing taxes at the same time. This will be an effort to stimulate the economy while at the same time not increasing the budget deficit. For example, one political party might choose to lower taxes combined with a matching decrease in government spending, so you could lower T and lower G, while another political party could choose to increasing the level of government spending and then match that with an increase in taxes. So you would increase G and increase T. Both of these approaches will keep the budget deficit unchanged, but because of households' marginal propensity to save, they will differ in their expansionary effect on the economy. Now, given these 4 or 5 different approaches, what is the expected impact on the economy in each case? Well, the impact will come from either the supply side, do nothing, or the demand side, all the other alternatives. Let's consider the supply side first. A shift of the short-run aggregate supply curve means that there will be a difference in the prices that are actually true in the economy and our expected prices. Now, since the nations, maybe I can just write this here. So if you remember the short-term aggregate supply curve, what we have here is that when you have a negative aggregate demand shock, nothing happens to our ability to produce goods and services, that our resources are still the same, our technology is still the same, so that cannot shift the short-term aggregate supply curve. So the shift must come from the price mechanism over here. And what happens is, of course, that once people and investors notice that we're going into a downturn or a recession, people will expect prices to increase slower or maybe even decrease. So our expectation is going to decrease very quickly. But because of the sticky prices, the price level will not change very much or very quickly. So you can see that P minus PE, this term, will become positive, and therefore the short aggregate supply curve will shift outwards. What we believe to happen is the following. As real GDP declines and prices begin to fall, economic agents very quickly adjust their price expectations, like I just said. But since actual prices change only slowly, we expect firms to be able to make a profit in the short run here. That is, prices stays high, so total revenue stays high, while the cost of production as represented by labor contracts, will actually be lower. So therefore, the short-term aggregate supply curve will shift out as firms do more of a profitable activity. It's shifting out. All right, so that was the supply side. Now let's think about the demand side. The monetary and fiscal policies that we have at our disposal is the government spending and taxes. Let's do monetary policy first. An increase in the money supply reduces interest rate, and lower interest rate reduces the cost of borrowing, which tend to increase levels of investment. So this is something we have seen several times, and you have probably seen it several times, that what we're saying here is aggregate demand is given by C plus I plus G plus net exports, and when we increase the money supply, interest rates goes down, the cost of borrowing goes down, and therefore investment will go up, and aggregate demand will go up with it. So what we're having now is that the aggregate demand curve will shift back towards what it was before. Seems pretty straightforward. Of course, when interest rate goes up, we don't ever know exactly how firms will respond to that decrease in interest rates, how much investment will go up. So it's a bit of a guessing game, but in general, this is the way it would work. Now, if you think about fiscal policy, we would have, again, that aggregate demand is given by the sum of consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. Clearly, an increase in government spending will directly affect aggregate demand, so that's a very direct impact. A decrease in taxes will go through the consumption function. So in general, if taxes go down, disposable income goes up, and therefore consumption goes up. We would have to take into account the marginal propensity to consume there, which is not usually 1, and therefore the impact on aggregate demand will be slightly smaller. But again, either one of those two cases will once again shift aggregate demand curve to the right and back to where it was before. So we get back to longer equilibrium and the same price level as we had before. Now, without going into any kind of detail here, I just wanted to mention one thing, which is this notion that perhaps we could achieve a stimulus of the economy without running into a budget deficit. Note that when we either increase government spending or reduce taxes, what we are doing is making T minus G, the government's budget, negative. So this was, we don't really want to have a budget deficit, but that's what would happen if we don't do something to explicitly balance a budget. And again, like I mentioned before, one political party might say, well, we can reduce taxes, and if we reduce government spending by the same amount, then we'll have the budget deficit balanced or unchanged. But of course, what will be the stimulus of this policy? And the other political party might say, well, we should increase government spending and match that by an increase in taxes. What will be the stimulus effect on the economy from that kind of balanced budget policy choice? Clearly, the stimulus effect from balanced budget policies will be a lot less than if you just do one of the two. For example, if you increase government spending by 100 and you increase taxes by 100, then aggregate demand is going to shift first 100 to the right, but consumption is going to increase. It's going to decrease by only 80. So therefore, it's going to shift back by 80, and therefore we might expect the overall effect to be a lot lower than if you use increased government spending. Vice versa, if you were to reduce taxes by 100 and match by a decrease in government spending by 100, then we would increase consumption by 80 if the marginal propensity to consume was 0.8, but then the overall effect on aggregate demand is actually going to be 80 minus 100, which is minus 20. So this will have an unintended consequence and actually make the recession worse. So you have to be very careful when you start thinking about using balanced budget policy choices, because the effect will either be very small or it can actually be negative. All right, there we have it. You have a negative aggregate demand shock. There are 4 things the government can do to fix it, and those are the things we have talked about right now. Thank you.